And now, please welcome our moderator, David Gergen.
Good morning. Good morning. It's good to see all of you, and welcome to Northeastern, and welcome to CGI again. You had a great time with the president last night. Those of you who were here. We're back now. We're going to have we have an excellent session coming. Just to give you a brief overview, we have a student presentation and a certificate. Then we're going to turn to our panel, and each one will speak for about 5 minutes about their own journeys as social change makers. After that, we'll have a chance to turn it back over to you to gather in small groups around where you're sitting now, excuse me, groups of 4 or 5, to reflect on what you've heard and where you think things might be going. How does it affect you? And then after you've had your sessions for 15 minutes or so, what we'll do is come back to essentially a plenary session. And in that time, you'll have a chance to ask the panel questions or make comments or reflections of your own. Now, first of all, let me call to the stage someone who made a commitment here last year as a student. Asha Antawal where's Asha? Is she here? There you are. Can you come up? And what we'd like to do is have you tell us a little bit. Tell us a bit about your commitment, sure, where you are, and then we'll have a little certificate. Is that okay? Okay, thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashna Agarwal, and I'm from India. Right now, I'm a student at Duke University. My partners and I founded Naukri to connect job seekers in urban slum settlements in India to job employers. Job hunting is very difficult in these communities, as women in these slums are not allowed to leave their houses too freely. They have many obligations at home and do not know how to access even part-time job opportunities while simultaneously handling their household responsibilities. We are seeking to eliminate middlemen who make unreliable and extremely expensive placements, and we want to enable direct and personalized employer-to-employee connections. Naukri is a mobile platform that connects low-skilled workers to employment opportunities in slum communities and urban crowded spaces. We will launch our app by the end of this year and are currently in conversation with the Indian Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports to implement our pilot most effectively. Naukri would also provide services such as financial training and legal advice for users of the mobile placement application. We will measure our success by the number of users, number of placements, employer as well as employee feedback, as well as the pre- and post-use incomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, are you part of the Duke Engage program?
I was.
You were. Did
yeah.
it help launch you with this?
No, my Duke Engage was really different than this program, but I did my Duke Engage after my freshman year.
Terrific, terrific. Mm-hmm. How did you decide to make this commitment?
Our team was a part of the HALT Challenge.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, and
tell people about that, because it's a major undertaking.
Yeah, sure.
Major competition.
HALT Prize is one of the largest social entrepreneurship platforms in the world, started by Ahmad Ashkar, and it is in collaboration with CGI U and now also with the United Nations. And every year, President Clinton announces a global challenge. So in 2015, when I took part, our challenge was to double the income of 10 million slum dwellers by the next 5 years, and that's how we got started with this project.
Well, that's interesting. And this is $1 million prize. Mm-hmm. It's $1 million prize. It's very, very competitive. But each year it has this challenge, and people in groups of 4. And there was a team from Boston who made it into the finals among 20,000 or so applications?
Around 35,000.
35,000 different teams competing, and the Boston team came into the top 6. So remember that. You've got a shot at this. It's annual. It'll be next year. Thank you. Where's the certificate? Here we go. Okay. Terrific. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, let me ask the panelists we would come to the stage. Alan, you want to lead off and go down to the far end, and we'll pick up from there. Everybody, come on. Let's start off. Okay, so we're going to ask each one of the panelists and to introduce themselves. Essentially, tell us about your journey, Alan, so we understand that you're really a serial entrepreneur. He has done this on more than one occasion and been very successful. And you should know that the organization that he and Michael Brown co-founded some years ago, City Year, became the model for President Clinton for AmeriCorps. He went to see what Alan and Michael were doing during the campaign of 1992, was so impressed by it that he turned it into the model for the whole country. So we have someone who's been a father of the social entrepreneurship movement kicking us off. Alan.
Thank you so much, David. It's fabulous to be here. I love coming to CGI U. The energy, the idealism, the commitments that you all make is totally inspiring. Before I start, I'd just like to ask a couple of questions. I know it's an auditorium, so it's hard, but I'm going to ask you to stand up if this fits you, okay? Please stand up if you've already started a social enterprise or social entrepreneurial organization. Wow. Okay. Please stay standing. Please stand up if you would like to start or you think at some point you want to start a social enterprise or social entrepreneurial organization. Wow. Okay. Please stand up if you think you'd like to at some point be on the leadership team of a social enterprise or social entrepreneurial organization. Okay. Please stand up if you're committed to using your talents to make a difference in the world. All right, give yourselves a round of applause. Okay, that is remarkable. I talk to a lot of young people. I don't ever get the entire room to stand up. So I'm just so excited to be here. So, they asked to just share a little bit about our journeys and advice. So as David mentioned, I'm Alan Khazei. I started City Year with Michael Brown. It was almost 30 years ago when I got out of law school, amazingly, to do that, and did that for about 20 years. And then I started another organization I lead now called Be the Change, inspired by Gandhi, who said, "You must be the change we seek in the world." City Year is a national service program, as David said, and we were honored to be a model for AmeriCorps. And Be the Change does collective impact work on three big issues: national service, trying to make it your service, a rite of passage for everyone; opportunity, we have an effort called Opportunity Nation, which is about fighting poverty for young people; and Got Your Six, which in the military means got your back, and that's about helping post 9/11 veterans transition and continue to be civic assets and leaders. So, but as I said, I started City with Michael. The first piece of advice I always give social entrepreneurs is find a partner and build a team. It's all about the team. Nobody changes the world by themselves. Michael and I get a lot of credit for starting City Year, but the truth is we right away recruited Jennifer Eplett-Riley and Neil Silverstein to be co-founders with us, and then we got Kristen Atwood and Charlie Rose and Stephanie Wu, and the reason City Year even happened and continues to grow is because of the team. So the first thing I say is invest in your team. I'm a big fan of Jim Collins. If you haven't read his books, Built to Last, Good to Great, you should. In Good to Great, Jim Collins says, first who, then what. It's all about who you get on the bus and then get them in the right seats. So that's number one. Number two is, second piece of advice I give you comes from Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War, and it's really about avoiding war. It's the art of strategy. And in there, he has a section where he says, every battle is won or lost before it's fought. It's all about the preparation, the training, the anticipation. I've learned that to be true in everything that I do. So what that means is you have to think about what's your ultimate destination. Where are you trying to get? And then work backwards. So for example, our big thing with City Year was we wanted to show that national service could bring people together from every single background. And there hadn't really been a totally diverse, inclusive core, uniting people from the inner city and the suburbs. People hadn't made it through high school with Ivy League graduates, all different socioeconomic, class, racial, religious backgrounds. So the very first person we put on the payroll, before me, before Michael, before our fundraising director, was Kristen Atwood, who was our recruiting director. We also did City Year on a timeline where young people would be available, first in the summer and then an academic year. So that was thinking about where do we want to end up and then preparing for it. Third, figure out what is absolutely fundamental to your vision and don't compromise on that. But, and this is the corollary, be willing to be flexible on everything else. So for example, as I said, we were really committed to showing that national service could unite everybody. That was core to us. We did a summer pilot program. We were able to raise $200,000 for 50 young people just to get started here in Boston back in 1988. We were having a hard time convincing people to give us the $1 million we needed for the full year program. It was just too much of a leap. And the time was going by, and we weren't raising the money. And then somebody showed up from a government agency and said, heard about what you're doing. We love what you're doing. I think this idea of young people doing service is really great. We'll give you all the money. We've got a new grant program, all the money you need to do your program. Yeah, oh, wow, exactly. But they said, there's just one catch. we think this should be for just at-risk inner-city young people. So those people you're recruiting from Wellesley and Newton, from Ivy League schools, from middle class, upper middle class, can't have them. So if you just change that, we'll give you all the money you need. But we said, and we needed the money. And we talked about it, we said, but that wouldn't be cittier. That wouldn't accomplish our goal. So we said no. Unfortunately, I won't tell you that story, but a guardian angel came along and we got the funding. So we refused to compromise on that. On the other hand, when we first designed City Year, we thought, well, this is going to be City Year. We're going to have a year-round program. We'll have young people start and go for the year. And then we did our summer pilot program. Here's another piece of advice. Listen to the people on the ground. Listen to your constituents. Listen to who it is you're engaging with. So after our pilot program, I interviewed every single Corps member, every single one, and said, give me your advice. You know we want this for a full year. What would you do? And I kept hearing, well, this is great, but if you try to do 12 months for 18 to 24-year-olds, it's going to fail. We're used to starting in September, ending in June. We're used to having our summers free. And by the way, you're not paying people a lot. They're going to need the summer to actually get another job and earn more money. And so we shifted just like that. It's not going to be a full year program. It's going to be an academic year program. So that's third. Fourth, I just got a couple more. Remember, there's a significant gap between idea and implementation. Everything is going to take longer than you think it's going to take. So plan for that. Fifth, if you want to grow an organization and if you want to have a lasting organization, make a deep investment in your culture. Again, Jim Collins in Built to Last talks about cult-like cultures. And it's your culture. The City Year has been able to grow primarily because we invested so much in our culture. If you visit City Year in Boston or Seattle or San Antonio or London or Johannesburg, you're going to feel City Year. And it's really important that so we have uniform, we have founding stories, we have things like no stueso, which means no one speaks twice until everyone speaks once, as an inclusivity tool. So invest in your culture. Sixth, commit totally to your project. This one's really important. You will have really hard days. You'll have days when people will tell you, your friends, this isn't going to happen, this can't work. But if you're totally committed, your commitment will come through and guardian angels will show up. I can guarantee you. I don't have time to tell the stories, but if people get inspired by your commitment, that's what will move people. And finally, I would say, don't forget to have fun. It's hard to change the world, but you got to make sure you make time for fun. So when we were doing City Year retreats, we would do dancing, we would do skits, we would have talent shows. I dressed up as Santa Claus, as Elvis, and the Blues Brothers. I was never more popular with the Corps members. So make sure you're having fun. And I would just close with, we need you. As you know, the world is in trouble. There's so many different challenges. And the reason I love coming here is because it feeds my soul. I wish your generation was in charge now. What CGI shows, CGI U, is that you're not future leaders at all. You're leading today. Thank you. She's not a plant, by the way. And we need you to continue to lead. You are the key to making this world a better place. So I just want to thank you and applaud you, and it's great to be here. Thank you.
Alan, just one quick follow-up question. Issue of patience. How long, how hard the journey can be, and how you have to be prepared for that?
Oh, absolutely. If you want, that's a great question. If you want to really make a dent in the world, it takes time. You know, I love it, and people have said this a lot. Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I really believe that. And if you look at history, you can see that. But it takes, I mean, I did City Year for 20 years. Michael's still there. I'm still working on the idea of national service. 30 years in now. So you got to be patient. You have to have sort of an urgent impatience. So you have to be patient in terms of what the journey takes, but you also got to have a feel of urgency, like, you know, we have to deal with these issues. We can't wait.
Okay, terrific start. Noorain Khan, let's turn to you if we would. Noorain Khan, coming from a very different place in life, coming from a foundation now, but she went through and was chief of staff to Wendy Kopp at Teach for America and then at Teach for All when Wendy went internationally with her program. Noorain is also a Rhodes Scholar, has a Yale Law degree, and she's now at the Ford Foundation, which is doing some terribly interesting work under its new leadership with Darren Walker. So I'm anxious to get your perspective, Noorain. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I feel totally spoiled just for all the tips you just talked about. I'm learning myself, so I'm so psyched. How's everyone doing this morning? Good. Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, I'll share a little bit about my journey because I always feel like, I guess when I was a student not too long ago, I always felt like people's journeys were magical. They'd be like, well, this happened. It was so easy and everything's amazing. I'll tell you a little bit about my trajectory. And I'll just say that my journey has actually afforded me the opportunity to see organizational strengthening and capacity building from a bunch of different lenses, from organizing and running things myself to now being a funder and trying to invest in some really established things and some really nascent ideas, some of which work out and some of which don't. And hopefully I can share some things I see from the funder side. But I'll just reiterate again, I'm so thrilled to be here with you all and learning together. After law school, I was a mergers and acquisitions attorney. I worked at a firm in New York called Wachtell Lipton. I did corporate governance. I always had in my mind that I wanted to do something more public-minded eventually. But it happened a little sooner than I thought, mostly because my first and second year as a lawyer, I spent literally all my vacation time on this really big Girl Scout project. And I was so tired. And then I was like, I think it tells you something when you spend all your vacation time on chaperoning girls at the zoo in Chicago or something. I just remember this real clarifying moment where I'm sure I looked like a huge mess. I hadn't slept. I just did a bunch of deals. And then suddenly I was literally chaperoning people at an aquatic show at the zoo. So, so those are you have to trust your gut for those moments when you're like, okay, how am I spending my time? What am I actually doing? And what does this say about where I need to be? So after that, I was Wendy's chief of staff at Teach for All. It's a global network of 40 countries where independent social entrepreneurs were inspired by the idea that in order to solve the kind of education crises in different countries, that the talent pipeline of folks involved in education is the key. And so folks in their own context develop their own models, kind of inspired by Teach for America, Teach First in the UK, and a number of other organizations. And so that was a real opportunity to think about capacity building because the Teach for All network is not a top-down network. It's really supporting independent social entrepreneurs in building their organizations. And what I love about networks is that it's not like all the best information moves from the most established organizations. It's not Teach for America and Teach First in the UK propagating their model. It's about some of those smaller Teach for Bulgaria, other organizations that are actually more nimble and able to be responsive, also sharing their creativity with the rest. So I think the network sharing went both ways, and I always find that to be interesting. So I think the message there for you all is that don't always look to the most established organizations for the models. Sometimes you can be nimble and responsive and have ideas that are worthy of sharing in kind of smaller incubation labs. After a little time at Teach for All, I now have the privilege of working at the Ford Foundation in New York. We're a social justice foundation fighting inequality around the world. We fund organizations, ideas, and institutions that fight inequality. We have a $12 billion endowment. We give away $500 million a year in the US and in 10 countries around the world. We have 3 offices in Asia, 4 in Africa, and 3 in Latin America. I share all of this because I think even before this, I knew some things, I just didn't fully understand the scale. And we're a social justice foundation, so we're looking to make social change and really thinking about the inequality lens. And I'll say, so obviously as a funder, I'm thinking about the many ways in which investments we make are actually in organizations that are going to live and be okay and not projected to death in terms of small project grants. And I hopefully have the chance to talk about that. But the last thing I'll say is I do a lot of board service, and I have for a long time. And at organizations of really different size and kind of grown-upness. And I now serve on the board of the Girl Scouts of the USA, a legacy organization. It's really big. It has different problems than, for example, I was on the board of an organization called Ms. JD, the National Organization for Young Women Law Students and Lawyers. And that, I think those experiences early on in an organization where you're starting to make you're starting to ask, like, when do we move from like a working board or really passionate volunteers to paid staff? When do you make that choice? Like, when does it make sense? I mean, it's like jumping off a cliff. Like, if someone is going to make the commitment to work, how do you pay them appropriately? How do you get everyone? I mean, really to make, there's some liminal moments that I think are common as you're growing an organization. And so through Ms. JD, another organization I work on, Libraries Without Borders, is really established globally, but trying to establish a US wing. And again, experiencing some of those same questions, like, how many staff do you need? And at what point are people like not okay because they're working so much? And so I hope we can dive into some of that. But I wanted to share some of my trajectory to be able to so you get the sense of where I'm coming from in terms of the different hats of thinking about organizational strengthening and capacity building.
Terrific. Noorain, let me follow up on one thing. I'd love to talk to you about impact investing and where that's going. Do that later. I first and foremost, Darren Walker, you're the head of the Ford Foundation, recently wrote this piece about moral courage and how important that has become. Could you address the issue of moral courage as you see it from the standpoint of the people in the room?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I'll just share a little bit about the context. I think my boss, Darren Walker, writes an annual letter every year, and this year it wasn't just in the wake of Charlottesville, but it was really just thinking about the trajectory of this country for the past year and what it takes to compromise potential relationships, funding streams, and other things to be able to say what you believe, along with all the consequences that come along with it. And one of the things he pointed out that I think about a lot, actually, because I'm involved in so many organizations that have really great reputations or really well established. I guess what I'm saying is, if you can and you have a voice and you're willing to live with the consequences, you have to speak out. If you think about the constituencies that you serve, and can you look them in the face and be who you are, and be okay with the consequences. And I guess what I'm saying is there's many organizations, he pointed out hospitals and universities even, that might have points of view, but and CEOs of companies that are constrained from saying what they believe and doing what they feel strongly about because of the consequences. And most of it's actually financial. And that's so unfortunate. And I think the lesson there is that really think seriously about whether you could be one of those voices, because I mean, I could go on and on. We can talk about politics, but the whole reason Trump's business council disbanded is because one CEO decided that he could live with the consequences, and then folks came along. So I think if you have the opportunity to speak with moral courage and you can do it and you know the consequences and you can live with them and you can plan around it, one of the best things you can do is bring other people along with you. It's so important. So I could talk about that at length, but in this time, I can think of no better people to be talking to about this. Like you all can talk and you should speak and bring other people with you, even if it's like your mentors and your funders and other people. Bring them along, because I think people are looking for young people's voices for sure.
Yeah, and it's worth understanding that often in this community, government was for a long time seen as sort of the boogeyman. You don't want to get involved. Alan found that you really had to get involved and align yourself. But it's also true that private businesses are accused of being indifferent. They're all just into capitalism and making a quick buck. But there are people out there who are CEOs and working and below who actually do have moral courage. And one example is Ken Frazier of Merck, African-American CEO, who was the first person out of the box to object and resign from the advisory board at the White House over Charlottesville. And this Merck is a pharmaceutical company that had billions of dollars invested in various new drugs that were going to be evaluated by the very administration he was breaking with. In other words, he was putting the entire life of that company, and the board went along with it. But he took the stance that really helped to bring other CEOs into the picture. He was the lone voice out there for a little bit of time. Then other people broke too, and it has made a major difference. And it really shows that don't write off the possibility of finding collaboration and finding supporters who can be with you on this journey. They can be very, very helpful. Okay, let's go move to Shana Dressler, who comes to us from the New York City Innovation Collective. I've been anxious to hear, Shana, about how this works. But is it really true you go through the streets of New York on a blue Vespa? Is that right?
It's true.
Maybe you could tell us more about that too. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm also very thrilled to be here. So I wanted to talk about three things. I wanted to talk about passion, failure, and leadership. So I started my journey into the social impact space working for a TV station called Link TV, which was a satellite television station based in San Francisco with an office in New York. And mostly we broadcast documentaries about social issues and environmental issues. And we had a program called Mosaic, which broadcast news from around the world so Americans could actually understand what was happening and how news was being portrayed in other countries. And so we would get the viewer relations would send around emails, and we'd get a sense of what our viewers were saying and what they were thinking and what they were asking us. And one question that kept coming up was, how can I get involved? How can I make a difference? So I was working in the music and culture department because the idea was, for all of the doom and gloom we were broadcasting, we wanted to lighten it up with a little bit of levity. And music is such a great equalizer and something that everybody can appreciate. And after a while, I decided I was going to write back to the viewer relations person, and I said, well, what do you tell all of our viewers? And she said, well, nothing. And I thought, wow, that's such a missed opportunity. We have all these people that feel like they want to get up and get involved. So I knew I was about at the end of my my time at Link TV because I had done what I thought I could do and contribute to the channel. But I said to my boss, look, I'm probably going to leave in 3 months, but I see this other opportunity. And so he said, well, as long as you get your work done, go ahead. You can use company time to figure this out. And when I finally approached the president of the channel and I gave him the idea, he kept on pushing back on me and saying, well, you live in New York and I'm in San Francisco. And I said, well, I'll move to San Francisco. And so, I mean, there was a back and forth. And I finally said something semi-obnoxious like, Kim, you're looking at a thoroughbred and you have a pony tied to a pony pole. And I mean, it kind of came out and I was shocked. It was one of these moments that I was having like this cryptic experience, like what spirit is speaking through me. But so I wrapped it up and I just understood that I had such passion, like I wanted to make a difference. I had also turned 40, and I think with big decade birthdays, you take stock of what have you done to date. And I had taken a course where we had to write our own obituary, which is very confronting when you're like, whatever, I guess I'm middle-aged, but. And my grandfather was, he was an immigrant, and he was also a very famous attorney. His law firm did the patent work for McDonald's and Mobil, Playboy, Colgate-Palmolive. And so he would tell me a lot of stories, and he did a lot of philanthropy. So fast forward to leaving Link TV, this was before crowdfunding, and I realized that so many people wanted to do good, but not everybody has a lot of money to invest in a project. So I got together a group of people, and I figured if we all contributed $100, we could probably do something pretty amazing. And I found a nonprofit because one of my big passions is chocolate. And fundraisers are a great way to start a nonprofit. And the nonprofit was called the Global Giving Circle. And we raised about $2,000, which I was very excited about later to understand that that's peanuts. But the next day, I got a cease and desist email from Global Giving, which is a very established nonprofit in DC. But this was like pre-social media, and I absolutely was shocked because I had done like a trademark search myself, but I hadn't hired an attorney. And the irony is, I'm the granddaughter of a very famous patent and trademark attorney. So, one thing I learned was in one mistake, especially around legal and accounting, your organization just is flattened. And I spent at least a day, if not 2 days, watching Netflix movies, completely, my ego bruised, feeling terrible that I had engaged so many people in this big passion of mine. So I also felt like I was leading by a lot of arrogance. Like, so why was it that I thought I was, that I would have the capacity to figure out legal just because I was the granddaughter of an attorney? So one of the lessons was, please get the small business skills, because whether you're going to found a nonprofit or a for-profit social enterprise or a nonprofit social enterprise, you are essentially running a business. And I think a lot of people are driven by the passion and the cause, but at the end of the day, if you want to scale, you need to have operations in place, and you need to have, everything as, and you never expect it, but you need to have, emails, and you need to have a drive, and you need to, have a database, and all of these things that you go into and you have no clue that that's what you're about to do. So my journey started in failure, and then we had a couple of other bumps in the road. And it was all about just not understanding this, a small business realities around having something that was valuable, and then figuring out if you had a cut. This is more business speak, but it really does translate into the nonprofit space where, you have to have a product that people want to buy, or you need to, in the nonprofit space, there's a triangle there, because you have the nonprofit, you have the funder, which is essentially you're trying to keep them happy so that they continue to give money. But essentially, the recipients of all of your goodwill are people that almost are never at the table. So they almost never get to say what they want because they aren't in those meetings. So those of you that are pursuing nonprofits, make sure that the people that you're serving are there, because so many times I hear ridiculous stories of, I met a Nigerian social entrepreneur at NYU at a competition, and he said when he lived in Nigeria, he got a donation of down jackets. I mean, like, the absurdity is insane. I've heard stories of nonprofits that have done multi-million-dollar programs where they're, one was in Rajasthan in India, and they had done a water project, and they had painted the wells in a certain color. They didn't have an anthropologist on staff, and it turned out that color the women associated with infertility. So what woman in her right mind, where family and that's an important thing, is going to go to a well for something as essential as water and risk that she won't have children? So definitely, as you're building your organizations, have a diverse staff. You want to have people that understand legal, that understand business, that are in design. And that's the last part of my story. I was hired by Google to run a brand new program a couple of years ago called 30 Weeks, which was an incubator for design entrepreneurs. And the project came about because at the Google Creative Lab, they would put together teams of a computer engineer and then a business development person. When they had the designer at the table right from the beginning, Google being Google, and making sure that they study everything, they found that those projects went exponentially better. And one thing people don't understand is designers are not just about aesthetics. They are trained deeply in strategy, and they're trained in human-centered design and design thinking, which are essentially customer research and empathy and all the things that we've heard. I know Ashoka for change makers, and empathy is a big thing that they've spoken about. So again, make sure that you have somebody that understands design, because design also goes into marketing, which is communication. So I would just say my message to all of you is to take the time it's going to take to understand every part of the business that you're going to have to build to be able to really have impact in the world.
Sean, could you go, this is very practical, very wise advice. The whole idea of design thinking, this is the rage on the West Coast and Stanford and other places out there. And the East Coast is sort of trying to figure out, is this just common sense, or is it something more? Can you help us with that? Because it's a very hot topic in some parts of the country.
Yeah, so the idea is that you are doing very thorough interviews with the people that you want to serve. So if you're in a for-profit business, then classically that's called your customer. If you're in a nonprofit business, your funder is also one of your customers and a recipient. And the idea is that, and what I found in teaching and in creating curriculum is a lot of people make tons of assumptions. They think it's a great idea. They talk to the people nearest to them, but they don't actually do the research, and they don't really find out, is what I'm assuming as so important that's near and dear to me actually something that is a problem that people on the ground, wherever it is that you want to work, perceive themselves as the problem. And so design thinking is a methodology where you can really start to understand through customer research and how people speak and how they interact and the objects that they use and the way they go through life. And so you're not coming from wherever it is that you come from, because it doesn't matter. It's that people are going to use objects, they're going to use cell phones, they're going to use mobile apps in a different way. And if you don't understand the way that they're using either technology or programs or education platforms, you're not going to be effective. So it's assumptions 101. Make sure that you're really curious, and more than deciding on things, you're asking lots and lots of questions. So a lot of design thinking is about the inquiry.
Thank you. Alessandra Brown, right? You've been waiting patiently to speak. But in many ways, we've been waiting for this moment because Roxbury, where Alessandra runs a community effort, is well known in the Northeast as a place where a lot of good, interesting social experimentation has taken place, and the most successful have often been, to go right to this point, where the people themselves have been consulted, and not just City Hall coming in saying, you will do this, we're going to bulldoze that, but rather giving more responsibility to the people in the neighborhoods, and it's been highly successful. So, tell us a little bit about the Roxbury Innovation Center, Alessandra.
Sure. So I'm a Bostonian, born and raised. We currently sit at 799 Columbus Ave, and I grew up for 25 years at 405 Columbus Ave. I kind of say that to say that this community is obviously the community in which I grew up in, but it was not the community that I was educated in. So I went to public school very early on. My mother's an educator for the public school system. And we started to realize that I was teaching my fellow students in second grade. And so I got Yellow Pages, which I don't know if anybody still uses the Yellow Pages anymore, but I got a Yellow Pages out and I went through schools, just looked at schools. I handed my mom an application in second grade for a private school in Newton, and we applied. And that's how my education kind of took me away from the community. I've always been in schools where social impact, social movements have been really important. I went to a Sacred Heart school for high school. I went to a Jesuit school for undergrad. And I started to realize that, for me at least, it almost seemed like common sense. I have always been very community oriented, and my community has always been overlooked. So how many of you have seen a map of the city of Boston? How many of you noticed Roxbury on the map of the city of Boston? Yes, it's a startling number of people who have not seen Roxbury on a map. So just so you know, Roxbury is the geographic center of the city of Boston. The building in which my offices is actually the most center point of the city of Boston, and all of you are sitting in Roxbury. So you haven't even seen yourselves on a map, and that is devastating. It's devastating because my community has 17% unemployment and the city average is 3.2%. We have just gotten to a median family income of $50,000 for a family of four. And in many places that is a lot of money. In Boston, it is not. Rental prices are $3,300 a month for a 3-bedroom. So if you can imagine a family of four trying to make that decision, it's very difficult. And we noticed that the Seaport, Kendall Square, all of these areas have resources that are being overlooked in Roxbury. We've always had small business owners, entrepreneurs, and innovators, but we haven't had the resources that we really need. And so a lot of my job at RAC is to be adaptable for my community, to not reinvent a wheel, but to help the wheel run more smoothly, to know what my community members want, what my community members need. And you know, that's been really important to me. I have conversations with my grandparents all the time. They live on a fixed income, and they don't even know if paying their rent is something that they want to continue to do. And they've been superbly independent people for the entirety of their lives. So as you make social impact, as you envision the communities, the people that you want to affect, make sure, you know, as Shana said, those people are in the room. Don't look for, I guess, the obvious people to hire. You want to also make sure that you're looking for people whose ideals and ideas are a little bit different from yours, because the worst thing that can happen for your organization is that everybody thinks the exact same. Everybody thinks of the community members, the clients, those who you're trying to affect in the exact same way, because you're not going to have the impact that you want to have if you all think the same. I have now 3 people on staff, which is amazing. And, you know, I went to Boston College. One of my colleagues went to MIT, and we think very differently. We think very differently. But we make a lot of impact because we think so differently. Because I can come up with a program, and then she can be like, oh, okay, well, you're not thinking about this. And it's a light bulb moment. But at the same point in time, she comes up with a program, and I'm like, I don't really think you thought about this logistically. And I'm correct too. So being adaptable, being able to seriously take conversation, even if it hurts a little, to be like, your idea was actually super correct, and that kind of hurts me because I've spent so much time on this project and I thought I had it perfectly. It's better to have somebody give you an idea than to implement something and then realize that there are pieces of it that are severely broken and you just didn't listen.
How do you get to scale?
So for RAC, scaling was a little bit different. When I started, I was the only full-time person on staff for 8 months. We hired a second person last summer, and then last week we hired a third person. But what I did really commit myself to is, as a nonprofit, looking for sponsors who also want to be program partners. I have lots of feels about companies that throw money at issues, because yes, money is great, but you know what's better? When your sponsor sends people from their company to teach classes. Right now we run classes with Microsoft and Google that are taught by Microsoft and Google, because they understand that there is a commitment to nonprofits financially, but there's also a commitment to nonprofits to the issues that nonprofits are trying to solve or alleviate, that happens programmatically, and they want to be involved in the program.
What kind of teaching do they do? Nutrition, or is it about the use of technologies?
So we focus a lot on small businesses, so it's a use of technology in your small business. Google will come in and they'll teach people how to do AdWords, what AdWords even means. Google Analytics, Microsoft will come in, and I have a lot of community members that have been running for decades, and they're still doing payroll and inventory in journals. And that hurts to see all these, paper journals on a shelf. And so Microsoft will come in and help them learn about Excel, the formulas that they can be using for their small business. They will give them credits to go into the Microsoft store and continue one-on-one instruction if that's something that they really want to do. So it's being able to say, yes, they are my sponsors financially, but they are my partners in the programming that we do.
Terrific. This has been a wide-ranging conversation with many different sort of trails we'd like to go down. I think what we'd like to do is take this break for you all to talk to each other. Why don't we do it for about 10 minutes or so, and then you reflect on and what you've heard. Importantly, you might think of a question or two you want to follow up, because we'll have about another 20 minutes or so of questions and from you all to the panel. Thank you very much. Take 10 minutes, and we'll be back to talk to you. Bye. But this is a time for you to raise questions with our wonderful panel. When you ask, would you please stand and then tell us your name and tell us the university that you represent here. You're from all over the country. So, floor is open. Who would like to fire away? Yes, sir. Stand up.
Hi, my name is Alvin. I'm a junior at Wesleyan University. Michael Brown.
Connecticut?
Yeah, Connecticut. So my question is, as students, and we're working on social issues that we're passionate about, how do we balance that with the prospect of careers based on the majors we're working on, and how do you make the distinction to say, okay, maybe this summer I should work on getting an internship or doing research, as opposed to working on the social issues that you're really passionate about, because sometimes the payoffs are different.
Did you want to direct that to anyone in particular, or anyone? Okay, terrific. Great. Good question.
I think that I tell people all the time, especially my interns, to think outside the box. So if you already have the social impact you want to make, what you want to do, find organizations that don't do the exact thing, but will give you aspects of what you're going to need as a leader. There are so many internships and opportunities out there that don't give you professional development. And that's one thing that I always stress, that you want to make sure if it's a paid internship, I'm not a big fan of unpaid internships, but they do exist, that you are developing skills that aren't just I know how to do basic administrative tasks, I knew how to do these basic things, but are actually giving you critical thinking skills. Because I was telling a group earlier, my background is I have an MFA in production and management for film and theater. It is not what most people expect when I walk into a boardroom, but what my theater degrees, what my English degrees have taught me is how to read a room, how to be adaptable, how to utilize that in other people. So no, I'm not the person you would think of. I don't have the degree background you would think of when I walk into a room. I'm talking about sponsorship, I'm talking about entrepreneurship, I'm talking about technology inequities, but I did develop skill sets that let me do what I need to do as a leader, and you need to figure out what those skill sets are.
That's such a great question. And I'm sure that really resonates with folks here, because you have these great ideas, you're getting momentum, but you might have expectations for your future that are different. So when do you make the call, this is my life's work, versus, let's see what else you can do? I would say I'm not a think outside of the box person all the time. I definitely pursued things that were stable, that made sense for me, that I could trust. It's just my nature. And the thing that I, now looking back, really reflect upon is the fact that our professional lives are actually very long. And there's so much time to learn. And so I just want to make a little bit of an argument for the other side, which is you can, so I had random internships. And when I was doing them, I was an organizer at Amnesty. I worked on the public policy team at Google 10 years ago. I worked at the civil appellate section of the DOJ. I will tell you, every single day in my job now as a program officer at the Ford Foundation, I'm drawing upon things I saw and experienced. I'm reflecting upon leadership examples that were good, bad, and ugly. And so you can work on your ideas, and that's amazing, but cherish the time when you're a young person and you have mentors and other people in your life that you can watch and observe and reflect upon. And I really mean it when I say you should journal what you see. again, good, bad, and ugly, because later on when you're called upon to make really difficult decisions, or, whether to follow your gut or not, you have those notes. Like I have notes from like when I was like a random summer intern that like no one paid attention to, and that like who is in the room watching these things happen. And that very much informs who I am. So all of this is to say, you can continue to absorb a lot and you can do a lot on the side. And I would just really encourage you to learn from and, suck the learning from everything around you. I think that's like available to you as a young person for a long time, not just while you're in college.
Alan?
Two things quickly. So you should pursue your passions, but whatever you end up doing an internship, don't be afraid to propose your own idea. So in my junior summer in college, I was an intern on Capitol Hill for my congressperson, Norm DeMoores. I grew up in New Hampshire. And, generally as an intern, you do legislative correspondence, you answer mail, the phones, et cetera. But I was interested in national service. And my congressperson who'd served in the Korean War wanted to bring back the draft. And so I actually went to him and said, I have a different idea. What about national service as an alternative to the draft? And could I do a report on you for that? And he said, sure. And it's even as an intern on Capitol Hill, you get access to congressional research. So you can call anybody. I'm calling from Congressman DeMoore's office, blah, blah, blah. And I spent the whole summer diving into the issue, and that's what got me educated. I met a bunch of people. Michael was also working on Capitol Hill that summer. We worked together on putting together hearings. So don't be afraid to propose your own idea. The second thing I would say very quickly is take risks in your 20s. So when I was your age, Ralph Nader came to speak at my college, who's this great public citizen. And he said something to me that I never forgot. He said, in your 20s, take risks. It's when you're going to be your most idealistic. You will probably not be married. You won't have kids. You won't have a mortgage. You will be the freest. Now, you'll have student loans, a lot of you. I did when I got out of law school. But, you can live cheaply. You can live off of peanut butter and jelly and pizza. And if you don't take the risks in your 20s, if you don't pursue your passion, if you don't do what your heart's telling you, 30s, 40s, it gets harder. You get married. You may have kids. You have a mortgage. You may have aging parents. It just gets harder to take those risks. So if you have something you want to pursue, I'd say go for it.
Let me just add one thing from a graduate school perspective. I happen to teach at the Kennedy School across the river. And, we get a lot of applicants for master's degrees, and there are a lot of schools like that you can apply to. What we're looking for frequently in admissions is not only the capacity to do the work, but something distinctive about your background, something that you've done a deep dive, you've really asked tough questions. I think you have to think carefully about whether you work for a big established nonprofit, which can often provide a lot of the training opportunities and the mentorship, or whether you want to go for a small one. If you go for a small one, try to do it's one that's got a chance for a moonshot. It's exciting, it's different, it's distinctive. That is much more striking. What you don't want to do is have a resume that's plain vanilla. You like things in there that sort of, oh, wow, that's interesting, or that's distinctive, or that's impressive that someone would take that risk. And then because that is going to project you forward, and the better the training you can get at the master's degree, and I think you should be thinking about getting a master's before somewhere along the way, the more impact that you can have over time. So it's wise to think about this carefully and to, I think, take risks, but you may want to take risks sometimes within a large organization rather than a small one. More like working for Google is a really smart thing to do. That's distinctive.
I just wanted to add that nobody really figures out the cost. So a lot of times you might figure out the cost of what your nonprofit or social enterprise, the program, but you're not thinking about the operations, and most people don't even think about what their personal expenses are going to be. So I did a class where I had everybody write down, even as a student, what their expenses were, and everyone was just kind of shocked that they had never multiplied their cell phone bill times 12 to figure out like what is that on a line item. So my biggest advice to people, because at the end of the day, you're here to do service, and there's a book called Despite Good Intentions. And if you're not ready to serve, which means you're not financially capable to have a long enough runway to go through all the learning you're going to have to go to launch your business, you're not going to have the impact. So to be in a hurry about founding something and launching it, I would suggest that you get an internship and get paid to learn. I mean, like, that's the best way to go about the beginnings. You're going to see all sorts of things. You're going to meet all sorts of people in different departments. And that way you can move forward and it's not going to cost you money.
Okay, great. Please. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So this question is directed at Alan, and any other panelists can answer as well. So my dad's actually on the board of City Year Philadelphia, and I grew up around City Year volunteers, and I just want to say thank you for creating City Year. Growing up around the volunteers has inspired me to give a year next year. I'm actually graduating 3 years and then going into the 4, just because the work is so incredible. But it's really interesting to hear like your insight on how City Year started. And I really like the idea of this like team aspect, and that's something that I'm personally kind of struggling with at the moment because my project is very early on, and it's just 2 of us now, and it's based out of Kentucky, and I live in Boston. So my question for you is, how did you go about like searching for team members, and how did you kind of get people dedicated? Because a lot of times I'm sure people in this room can relate. College students are ambitious, but sometimes that ambition fades, and it ends up hurting, the people at the center of the organization because people aren't as dedicated and reliable. And so I'm kind of interested to hear about how you build a team because I actually live here. So.
What's your name?
Rebecca.
Great. No, Rebecca, thank you for your question. Thank you for your dad's help with City of Philadelphia. It's a great program there, and thank you for your interest in wanting to serve as well. So very quickly, I think it's all about the team. I really do. Nobody changes the world by themselves. Even Nelson Mandela had the ANC. Gandhi had the Congress Party. I mean, nobody does it by themselves. Even the great heroes of all of us. Martin Luther King had the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So, and as a student, the great thing is you've got like your friends who live right next door. And, appreciate that while you have it. And you've got other students. So, and now you have social media. What we started, and literally Michael and I started this, talking in our dorm room, but we very quickly enlarged the conversation. And we would have sessions, we just invite people. We have this idea, about national service. Will you come and just hear about it and give us your feedback? So just start inviting people. Whatever your idea is, you can start with your friends, or they may have people, a lot of people got involved, we didn't know them, but they were like one person away. So, and we just started having sessions where we'd say, come and learn about it. And then we ended up actually using the Kennedy School and just got some space there. And we would start having like weekly sessions where we just open up to anybody who wanted to help. And all of a sudden, people came out of the network who wanted to help. And then we had, my first partner after Michael was Jennifer Epler Riley, and we had worked together on a presidential campaign. And so I as volunteers, and so I called her up. And then our second partner, Neil Silverstein, he actually was really good friends with somebody Michael went to summer camp with. So the main thing is get your idea out there, and then just invite people. And some people just show up, and people want to get involved. And it's your passion and your commitment will drive others to come. And it's a great question. Thank you, Rebecca.
Please, Noorain.
Okay. I'll just say very quickly 2 things. You're totally right about students and interest fading. I would say think about ways to engage people where they can off-ramp and it's okay. I think people sign up and there's like this indefinite expectation of commitment, and then it sort of dwindles, and then people feel guilty and they don't want to tell you, and maybe they're going to be more free. What if people can commit to a semester or something, and they go really hard for the semester? No hard feelings when people walk away, but think about structuring opportunities so that people can get on and off and know very clearly what the expectations are mutually. And B, which is something Alan said earlier, like create joy, constant joy, fun experiences, celebrations, because no one will want to commit to things. And so if you create a sense of community, if you cultivate a sense of membership, of loyalty, that creates the joy that sustains you in this work. It's so, I have joy written on my notes like 50 times because I feel it so strongly. And if you ask everyone here, I think that's probably going to be true for them too.
Yeah, I was going to say also surround yourself with mentors and other people that are already in the field that want to take you on as somebody that they can really support. And don't put anybody in a volunteer position that's going to not be able, well, so anything that's really essential for you to grow your business, you don't want somebody that you're not sure about. So for those positions, you might want somebody to jump through a few hoops. Like I'm a mentor in a couple of programs in New York City, and I sign agreements. So again, for those people that you really need to count on, you might want to go the extra step. But I completely agree that you want to appeal to a wide audience. The in and out is brilliant. And then keep anything that's going to be a growth position, somebody that you're going to spend more time with to see if they're really there for the long haul with you.
I would say really quickly at the same time, don't let your passion and commitment allow you to burn yourself, your volunteers, and your staff out. Sean and I were talking earlier, and there are days where we are in intense like brainstorming, program curriculum building, and I have to send the staff home because after 8 hours of putting a curriculum together, we start looping back, and it's because we're starting to burn out for the day. So make sure that, yes, be passionate, be committed. Your staff should be passionate and committed. Your volunteers should be passionate and committed, but don't allow that to let them burn out.
Good. We have, and we'll try to get to 2 more questions. Yes, please. Yes, ma'am. I think.
Hi, my name is Anika Lula from the University of California, San Diego. So my question is to all the panelists. So do you know any stories or projects or have any experiences that integrate, the hard sciences, engineering, or technology into these social innovation projects in a way that really creates agency for the people that we're working with? Just because, so I myself, I've grown up in Silicon Valley, so I've, seen the blessings of tech, and then I moved down to San Diego and moved to the U.S.-Mexico border region and saw, this huge gap between the people who have access to knowledge about, tech and the hard sciences and the people who don't. So I was just curious if you all knew of any projects that really seek to not, just teach like coding classes or things like that, but really ways to increase agency in terms of using technology as a medium for disadvantaged populations.
So I'm going to make a shameless plug. So my entrepreneur residence and Fab Lab manager, her name is Nisha McCrae. She runs a nonprofit called Bajika. It's MBADIKA. And she uses product design, development, and digital fabrication in communities like that to teach people how to turn their dreams into reality. So she's worked in South Africa on helping students develop solar-powered cell phone chargers, because everybody has a cell phone, but not everybody has access to electricity. There are definitely organizations like hers out there who are willing to mentor and collaborate and travel. You just have to, again, you have to kind of sometimes think outside of the box when you're looking for them. You sometimes have to think about the technology you want to bring and then look for nonprofits that use that technology. The Schwab Foundation, they set up Fab Labs all over the world. I think they have over 1,000 now. And they are really looking to get into communities where technology is not easily accessible to assist those communities with equipment and programming. But unless you're looking at Fab Labs specifically, I don't think people oftentimes find them, even though what they do is not restricted to engineers.
I was just going to give 2 resources, Charity Navigator and GuideStar. And so if you do keyword searches, at least you'll start to learn what's out in the space. And I think there's something called TechSoup. Does anyone know that one?
Yeah.
TechSoup. So I just think just starting to Google things and see what's near you.
Also, Google, speaking of, Google just announced in Pittsburgh, I think like 2 days ago, a lot of their resources are now online, and they're doing online classes in order to assist people in getting better acquainted with G Suite. Microsoft does some of that. And there are other like larger companies out there that are starting to put up aspects. Spotify does some of it with their open sourcing. It's just looking at things that you already use and looking for foundations.
Yeah, I'd say it's a great issue, and I'm really glad you're working on it because it's a huge gap. 3, Code for America. It's like Teach for America, but for coders. And it's people who have expertise who are doing projects. Now, I don't think they're working exactly on what you're working on, but if you talk to them, I'm sure they could help. There's FIRST, which is the robotics competition that Dean Kamen started, which has gone all over the country now. And he's an incredible resource. And then the third one off the top of my head is Citizen Schools, which was actually started right here in Boston by Eric Schwartz, which works on after-school programs for middle school kids. They have a whole initiative around STEM. And so those are three.
Yeah, let me just, there's something called the Schwab Foundation, which comes out of the World Economic Forum. I happen to be on the board, and it's an organization that recognizes and then tries to work with social entrepreneurs around the world who are doing various projects, and they select people every year who are outstanding social entrepreneurs. If you go on, if you Google the Schwab Foundation fellows, or social entrepreneurs, you'll find some amazing stories of people around the world who are drawing upon technology to solve big, tough, persistent social challenges. One last question. Here, we go up here, please.
Hi, my name is Megan McCormick. I'm a dual degree candidate at the Harvard Kennedy School and at MIT Sloan School of Management. And I'm running Dare to Innovate, which is a youth-led movement to end unemployment in West Africa. My question is, scaling organizations is a lot about scaling people. So what are the best practices you've seen in bringing in those early founders who don't have anyone underneath them, transforming them into managers, and also understanding in the global development context, foundations don't love to fund overhead. So how do you message the value of developing your people to those foundations so that you can actually invest in talent?
Question.
That's a tough question. I'm actually kind of moving into leadership. And I would say, and this is what, maybe it's a dirty secret, maybe it's not, but I think you have to, in your budget, you have to put into the budget that kind of training because you won't get direct funding for these things. And it's so valuable. I'm on 2 boards and we're having such problems around leadership. And a lot of it is the difference between people first or structure first. And so I think so much of these issues are about actually something that not a lot of people talk about, which is self-awareness. So if you don't have emotional intelligence and you're not really tapped into how people work, you're going to have a really tough time. So I would just say really being clear in communication, making sure everybody knows where their role stops and starts, kind of in the beginning, staying in your own lane, and really being, speaking to each other. Because when you're a small team, the roles are very, very blurred. And yet without a clear understanding of what it is that you're supposed to be accomplishing, I think you run into a lot of problems. But I would just say, it's so hard. Leadership is just a little mysterious. Until you lead, you don't really know what's working and what's not working.
Yeah, I would add, it's great what you're doing, Megan. And I would say that when we were starting to scale Cityyear, we were Trekkies. We love Star Trek. So we created something called Cityyear Academy after Starfleet Academy. And you're absolutely right. It's all about the people. And you have to have the people to scale. Otherwise, you won't scale. And we actually put it as part of our program budget. And just say, because you can't deliver a strong program if you don't have people who can do it. And we design courses knowing what we need, and people, get credited for what they learn. I would also try to find a private sector partner. I mean, foundations aren't great on this, but you can't point to a successful company in the world that doesn't have a strong training budget. So we got Comcast actually to sponsor our academy. And because they understand the importance of training people. And we also tap some of their people to help. So I think about, is there a company that's maybe doing business in West Africa that you could partner with and say, be our training sponsor and help us design it and also help fund it?
Can I just say very quickly, I'm so glad you put your finger on one of the most pernicious things in philanthropy, which is this desire to have lean organizations that don't invest in their people, their administration, their culture, the things that make organizations resilient. It is ugly stuff. I'll say we at Ford believe that I think traditionally people like to keep, and funders like to keep overhead at 10%. We're working to move the field to 20%. For international organizations, the true cost of overhead is actually closer to 40%. And so we're just trying to recognize that the reality of what it takes to run organizations well and invest in people. And we're bringing other folks along. So, we're doing some work with Bridgespan to get the word out there about the true cost of doing business. And the second thing I just want to say is what both of you spoke to, which is there are ways to characterize things that might be considered overhead but are in a gray area into program, and do that do that without apology, and make your case for how investments in certain things are part of your program delivery effectively. I think funders might take a closer look, but if you can answer the questions confidently with facts, with evidence of the transformational impact of those investments, I would hope that folks would be able to get around that. I certainly do. I love to talk about why people are spending money in what ways, and I think there's just a certain element of trust if you can back it up.
I just had one more thing, which is a great resource. The World Economic Forum put out in January of 2016 the jobs report, and in it they're saying that the future of work is a lot about the soft skills. So, that's a fantastic thing to quote, and a lot of it is about communication and empathy. I would use that as part of your case to make for why you're funding this.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we must draw this to a close, but the wonderful thing about CGI is the conversations continue. And you'll have a chance this afternoon and going on through the day. But in the meantime, I think let's express our gratitude to this wonderful panel. Thank you very much.